Hello, Internet, and welcome to the Sprocket Docket for October 16th, 2014. My name is Derek. We'll go around and introduce everybody that's in here right now. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
I was here last week, but yeah, just been part of Dirty Sprocket for the last couple of years, and that's about it.
Yeah, I'm Robert, and then what Jake said.
You haven't been involved with this for years.
All right, maybe not quite as long, but a week.
My name is Robert, and I'm a blatant liar.
Only when I'm on TV or the internet or in person.
Okay, I'm Natalie, and I am going to school at University of Minnesota Morris, and I'm an English and anthropology major, and I just started helping with Dirty Sprocket, and the only thing I've really done is write a review for Gone Girl, so.
Fantastic review. However, I think Robert was going to murder you because it was...
Why?
Spoiler.
Well, no, it was a great review. Thanks for throwing me under the bus, Derek. That was awesome.
Yes, I will do that.
He was pretty upset with the spoilers.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I said spoilers.
No, see, no, you did good. You did fine. It was.
I'm sorry.
All I'll say is, I mean, it was a really good review. I mean,
Thank you.
I enjoyed reading it, but normally you read a review to determine whether or not you want to watch a movie.
I know.
I realized after I read your review there was no longer a reason for me to watch the movie. So I'm gonna read the book
Alright.
instead. It's all right. It was a good review, but I know how it ends. So,
Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry I ruined it for you.
That's all right. It's all good.
So this is Natalie. She ruins movies. No.
No. All right. We're running a little bit behind. We're having some technology issues. We might have a couple other people joining still as we go. They're having even more technology issues than I was having. Real quick, kind of a recap of what we got going on right now for Dirty Sprocket. Nothing really has changed since last week. Jupiter Mars is still coming. A short little horror film, Friend, is still coming. Other than that, keep checking out our blogs. We're posting pretty regularly. Our schedule is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then other stuff as they come in. So, I mean, honestly, that's really kind of what we got going on. It's a little bit of a light week as far as kind of projects go. We got some stuff hopefully coming soon. So, do you guys have anything you want to pimp real quick, talk about before we get kind of into the meat of our discussion?
No, let's jump right into it.
All right, great. Okie dokie. Tonight we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about sexism in the video game industry. Now, and kind of what I mean by that is we're not necessarily saying, or at least I'm not necessarily saying there is or there isn't. Kind of what we're doing tonight is just a discussion about it. So it's stuff that's kind of come up recently in the news. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with kind of Gamergate that's going on right now. I know, Robert, you are.
I'm learning a little more every day.
Natalie or Jake, have you guys heard of that?
Yeah, I've been following it a little bit, so I know what's going on. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm completely in the dark, so
All right.
if you would like to explain it to me and the rest of our audience.
Well, and technically, I mean, we're not really going to talk much about it because it's not necessarily what our discussion's about. It's just kind of something that Robert and I have been talking about, and it kind of led into this larger discussion of kind of the video game industry and stuff. Basically, there's a whole... We could do an entire podcast on that, I think, and Robert actually suggested that. Even if you get a chance, Debbie actually just wrote kind of talking about Gamergate yesterday. Went up on the site yesterday. Or Wednesday. I don't remember. Yesterday was Wednesday. I'm confused. I'm sorry. It's been a long time. But yeah, kind of along what's going on with Gamergate, it's kind of brought forward, I think, a lot of people talking about sexism and kind of what that means for the video game industry. So, sorry, Isaac just messaged me. He said he figured it out, so he's about to join. So I think one thing we can maybe talk about real quick before we kind of get in the meat and potatoes of this is maybe talk about your experience. If you know, oh, there's Isaac.
Howdy.
Isaac, real quick, introduce yourself to everybody.
I'm Isaac Otterman, and I'm a kid. Student
That
guy.
is a fantastic introduction, Isaac.
Thank you.
Isaac is also one of our contributors. A recent blog post. Yours went up Monday? Yeah,
Yes.
Monday. And it was even about video games. So, Isaac, this is something that's near and dear to his heart. He loves video games, so it makes sense to have him on. But yeah, we can maybe really talk about, like me personally, I used to probably be way more of a gamer than I am now, back when I had time. When I was a young kid, I used to play a lot of video games. Still do. I've got an Xbox that I get to play games on every once in a while. Just recently bought the new Tomb Raider, which has been pretty awesome. But again, I don't get nearly as much time to play with it as I'd like. So, how about everybody else just go through kind of, do you play video games? Are you not interested? We'll do that.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of in the same boat as you, Derek. Obviously growing up, had a lot more time to kind of play games and stuff. And now that I'm older, I kind of find myself circling back and just replaying some of the old games that I love, like recently just started replaying the Nintendo 64 Legend of Zelda, so Ocarina of Time,
Classic.
Yep.
I like. I still game once in a while. I like story-driven games. I like games that have long stories that go with them. So I don't play a lot of MMOs or any of that kind of nonsense. But something comes up like a Mass Effect or something like that, I'll sit down and I'll play it.
Rubber and I have had long discussions about Mass Effect.
I actually played Mass Effect for a little while.
It's amazing.
It's my boyfriend is obsessed with it, so I played it for a while. I was like, this is cool. I like it. Yeah. But I don't play a lot of video games. I play Pokemon, and I play a couple like Steam games. So I played 7 Days to Die and then Civ 5, so like the Civ games, Civilization, Sid Meier's games. Just kind of like, I don't know, I'm not super involved in video games, so, but a little bit.
Did your boyfriend or did you play the male shepherd or the female shepherd?
I played female shepherd, so
Yes.
that was, yeah.
FemShep is the best.
Yeah.
I like her voiceover work a lot better than the guy shepherd.
Okay, is it true that it's the same guy from Lost? Is that...
No.
Okay, someone told me that.
I don't think so.
I heard it was. I thought that was really weird, but I don't know.
Could just pretend it is.
We can just pretend.
Well, Freddie Prinze Jr. is in the third one, so.
Okay. Okay.
So Isaac.
Yeah, I play some video games. I have a few games that I play every. I have a lot of games. I only have like a lot of games. Let's see. Yeah, I can.
All of your video games. I think we'll be here for a while, won't we?
Yeah. No, I know a lot about stuff about games.
Cool.
It's probably the news I follow best.
Okay. Well, then I think, let's kind of get into it. I think, like I said, kind of talking about the Gamergate stuff. Again, I mean, that's not necessarily what we're talking about. But one of the things that's kind of happened recently is Anita Sarkeesian, if you guys know of her, everybody.
Yeah.
Yes.
She's kind of a feminist, kind of academic type. She's been doing a video series called Tropes versus Women for video games. It's kind of discussing different issues of sexism in the video game industry, games themselves, things like that. And she's a pretty lightning rod for controversy within the industry, and there's a lot of people that absolutely love her and a lot of people hate her, which has kind of led into, most recently, she's gotten a few different death threats from the internet. So has a few other kind of prominent females in the industry. We're in the indie scene. Zoe Quinn, who is a big part of the Gamergate and everything going on there, she's had some death threats, and most recently indie developer Brianna Wu received a couple of death threats. And to be fair, kind of to some of the other stuff that's going on as far as Gamergate, there's been a few different prominent members that are very for the Gamergate that have actually received death threats recently too. Boogie, big YouTuber, as well as Total Biscuit, but I think Total Biscuit probably gets death threats on a daily basis from the internet.
Yeah, probably.
But that's kind of led to a larger discussion, that this happens, and this isn't honestly the first time that's happened to Nita Sarkeesian. Ever since she started her video series, she's been getting death threats, and a lot of people are kind of attribute that to the gaming culture. I guess that's kind of the industry and the people who play them, kind of saying that proves that it's kind of a misogynistic group with a lot of issues with women. And I guess let's maybe kind of start talking there. Let's start to talk the broad strokes here. And what do you kind of think about that?
I actually disagree with that because I think that she brings up a lot of really valid points about women in video games, and I think that the tropes are really important, and I think that that's one of the main problems in video games, but I don't think that there's an insinuation that gamers themselves are misogynistic. I think that it's the nature and like the violence of the games that can perpetuate violence, but I don't think that gamers as a whole, I don't think the majority are misogynistic or sexist. I think that it's just kind of sort of the culture, but just the image that video games portray and the tropes that they perpetuate, like she stated.
Well, I think too, there's recently been a lot of articles, again, more specifically Gamergate, but that's how a lot of, especially kind of the mainstream media, is kind of latched onto this right now, and that's a lot of kind of the narrative that's being talked about right now is that, the video game culture is misogynistic. Mm-hmm. You hear white cis males, neckbeards, virgins a lot from people, which is funny because it's kind of a lot of the same, insults that I kind of remember a little bit as a kid. Back when we used to play, Robert and Jake and I, when we were younger, it wasn't quite the thing it is now. I remember PC gaming, but it wasn't like everybody had one, or there really wasn't the Maddens. Madden it exists, but it wasn't like the big release every year, or Call of Duty, that has all of these people in it. It was a little bit more a smaller community, and I think there was a lot of people that kind of latched onto the community, kind of bullied nerdy teenagers. A little bit of a stereotype, but I think a little bit accurate.
Well, I think the gaming, when we were growing up, gaming was a silly pastime. It was a silly hobby. It was a toy. There wasn't a culture. We made it. Our generation. It was. Now. It's a much different thing. It's a billion-dollar industry. You got. Corporate interests. And all kinds of different people vying for a piece of that pie. But yeah, when we were growing up, it was just kind of an odd distraction, really. So a lot of those things didn't exist. And saving a princess in a castle was perfectly normal.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing now. There's just so many people and so many different kinds of people participating in the culture because there's just an entirely new market for games, like indie games, and there are just a lot of different types. So I think that's where a lot of the controversy is coming in, because there are new people exposed to the culture.
And just the fact that, everybody's mobile phone, they have some kind of a game on there that they can play. And kind of really expanded and brought the market out further. Like some of the stats they were saying on one of the articles Derek had sent out, 53% of all gamers play games on their smartphones. So, that's over half. So.
Well, I think that kind of brings up an interesting discussion as we're kind of talking about the gamer identity a little bit here. Because there's a statistic I've been seeing around online a lot more recently where it's saying, I think it's like 48% of gamers are now women. They tend to be older and stuff. But one of the kind of interesting things is it becomes is how do you define the term gamer? Mm-hmm. If you play Angry Birds on your phone, is that considered being a gamer, or is gamer more specifically for kind of hardcore gaming?
Yeah.
You play quite a bit. You have a system. You purchase different kind of games. So that's kind of interesting because if you look at maybe what would be more considered kind of the hardcore demographic, it again is very much more skewed towards men. Mm-hmm. Kind of 18 to 35 tends to be for those type of games. But yeah, it's interesting. Regardless of your term, even for the hardcore gaming scene, though, the statistics are quite on the rise for female gamers. That would even kind of fit more in the hardcore demographic.
Okay, I have to go, but enjoy your discussion. You guys
Okay,
are
thanks,
wonderful.
Natalie.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Yeah.
Natalie was joking that she was our token female, and now she's gone.
Darn.
Yeah.
Now we're all horrible.
And now it's four dudes talking about sexism.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's sort of a bummer for us because we're always catching crap about this kind of thing. You hear about this all the time, about you guys talking about crap that concerns women, and there are no women present. But we tried. We tried, and things came up. It's not our fault.
Yes. I do think, though, I mean, it's some of those things where we talk about, things that, things within the video game industry that, affects women, I think does affect, kind of as a whole, the group as a whole, not necessarily just women.
I mean, as far as like
let's
the
maybe
death
talk about
threats,
Anita Sarkeesian for a minute.
you were bringing up there earlier with the death threats and all that kind of stuff. It all comes down to the person who just yells the loudest, though. That doesn't necessarily represent anybody or a huge cross section of the gaming community. It's just the people who are yelling the loudest, basically, getting their word heard over everybody else. And kind of like how you're saying, how do you define a gamer? It's kind of like a buzzword anymore. Like, you hear the word foodie. What exactly is a foodie? Somebody that enjoys food, or somebody that really seeks out and goes on all this adventurous stuff? Like, at what level does it become? Is somebody a gamer? I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's honestly one thing that people have been talking about more recently with some of the death threats. Is there's a lot of people claiming that the death threats really aren't coming from, say, a faction within gaming, more kind of third-party trolls that are just doing it. It's kind of an opportunity to be shitty on the internet, and people love being shitty on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that's a crappy deal all the way around, though, because I mean, you can't not take that seriously. So I mean,
absolutely, man.
She's kind of backed into a corner there, and when people do that, it doesn't matter if it's one guy who just wants to be an idiot, or 10,000 people that have serious, beef with the things that she's saying. Essentially, they make her right. Like, it doesn't matter what her message is, and I've seen some of her stuff, and though she has some pretty insightful observations, I take exception to how she's selling them. I think she's a little dishonest in the way that she's portraying some of this stuff, but it doesn't matter. When you got people out there threatening to kill her, you make her right. She wins.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, at least me personally, I've watched her videos and stuff. I honestly can't stand her. I think she brings up some good points, but I think she glosses over a lot of stuff, and I think she tries to kind of portray herself as an academic, but I don't feel like the work in any way is academic. It's just, it's basically the same thing as what we're doing right now. It's just, it feels more like opinions.
We're professionals.
But on the side of that too is it's always what people say is, I may disagree with you, but I'll defend your right to say what you want. Because I don't think she should be shut up. And I think what she's talking about is valid stuff to be talking about. I think we should be talking about it. I think what happens too often is when you have these, kind of crazies that, really, like Jake said, the loudest. I think the problem is they've made it so there's fewer people that can have this discussion. People are either maybe scared to have it because they don't want to have death threats, or if you maybe disagree with her, it's kind of come to the point a little bit where you disagree with her, it almost comes, then you get a lot of claims of you're being a misogynist because you're disagreeing with her, because then they kind of lump you in with the crazies. And it's too bad, because honestly, it's hurt the ability to debate her points a little bit, because everybody's gone nuts.
Well, yeah, I think a little bit, though, that's kind of our fault, those of us that would disagree with her, because by and large, the people who are arguing the loudest, well, they're the idiots, right? Mm-hmm. And the guys that might be more reasonable-minded, the guys that might have a more, I don't know, intellectual disagreement with her, they're not the guys that are getting online and saying, hey, this is a good observation, but I disagree with you here, and this is why. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry?
I was going to say, even if that is happening, that's not what's getting put on the news, And
that's true, too.
There's reasonable discussion with Leahy about, that's just not whatever makes the news, but.
Mm-hmm. Now, have you seen any of her stuff, Isaac?
Not necessarily. I know what she talks about, though. I sometimes question if the amount of sexism, like she says there is in games, is actually there, because I've played quite a lot of games, and quite a lot of them aren't really all that sexist. Like, a good majority of the games that are coming out have female protagonists or ways to, you know, strong female characters. You know, especially in the past 5 to 10 years.
Mhm. Well, that kind of goes in line, I think, a little bit with how do you define sexism a little bit. You know, I think sometimes, you know, if there's not a strong female character in a video game, it's, you know, it's sexist. But I mean, is that really sexist? Or, I mean, where's that bar at? And I think,
I don't know.
That's my train of thought.
Like, can you think of any examples off the top of your head of like what she is claiming, or from specific games?
Well, a lot of things she talks about is like the damsel in distress trope,
Mm-hmm.
which gets used a lot. I mean, like Robert said, you know, Save the Princess was
Mm-hmm.
an alright thing to do. But it is interesting how many games still today still use that. I mean, honestly, one of the most recent games, that Shadows of Mordor that just came out, which, by the way, looks like a really awesome game. But it starts out where your character is married and has a son, and the first thing that happens is your son and wife are murdered. Technically, you're murdered too. But then you kind of come back. But it's kind of another game that's, yeah, it's still kind of this idea of so much of the motivation is of the protagonist is kind of set by, you know, possibly violence towards women, which I do think it's a thing that happens way too often. But I guess then the question becomes: is it because of sexism of why that is, or is it laziness of why that is?
And I mean, that's kind of a story as old as time. I mean, you know, that's the story in a lot of books. That's the story, you know, the trope, you know, isn't just in video games, you know, it's in movies. So, but I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that, you know, if that's qualifying, you know, video games are not the only guilty party.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I think one example that Anita Gal made, and I think she's right about this, is you tend to see women in two different roles in video games, and one of them is she's either the victim that we're going to save, or she's the super heroine. And either way, these are kind of stereotypical roles, right? And in both scenarios, she's playing a hypersexualized role, right?
Mm-hmm.
You very rarely see a fully fleshed out female protagonist in a game. I mean, that's true. You know, whether she's the lead head protagonist or if she's some prostitute in Grand Theft Auto 5, it's very rare that you find a complex female in gaming. I mean, I don't, you know, between the three of us, you might be able to come up with 3-4 names out of thousands of games.
Sure. But I think too, I think I mean, you could almost put that against some of the male protagonists too. How many of them are kind of fully realized characters, and how many of them are just stereotypes? Now, they might be less maybe hurtful stereotypes, but I think a lot of times, I think just characters in general, a lot of times in video games are not very well written.
Well, I think, yeah, I would have to disagree a little bit there. All male protagonists are some kind of archetype.
Mm-hmm.
I think almost all female characters in games are some kind of stereotype.
Okay.
I mean, that's my opinion, but you know, that's one area that she mentioned that I tend to agree with her on. But you know, I mean, after some of the things that I've read and you know, some of the videos that I've watched on this, I think it's a foregone conclusion that sexism definitely exists in games.
Oh yeah. I'd say it definitely exists, but I think the amount that people say it exists is probably over-exaggerated. I don't know. If you look back at Half-Life 2, which, you know, was made like 7-8 years ago, probably has
now.
Yeah, probably one of the better examples of females in games, Alex Vance. But even today, like XCOM Enemy Unknown, it's a game entirely composed of, you know, like soldiers, but half the soldier, you get randomly assigned soldiers, half of whom are male, half of whom are female, and you know, it's entirely random. You know, sometimes I'll have like entire squad just composed of female soldiers because that's how the game's like set up. And trying to think of other things off the top of my head. And
I
like
think one
Shovel
thing that
Knight
is
is
interesting, I mean, it's not necessarily saying that this is because of sexism the way
Yeah.
it is, but there's definitely far fewer female protagonists in video games than there are male protagonists. I mean, that's pretty much an undeniable fact. That's not to say that there aren't really strong, well-written protagonists, but I mean, percentage-wise, it's much more heavily towards male characters. Now, me personally, I think more what that comes from, than just my opinion, I think a lot of times video games is becoming such a high-budget industry. I mean, how much did GTA 5 cost? I heard like $500 million.
yeah.
A crazy
I'm
stupid
not sure
amount.
how accurate that is, but it was a lot of money. So I mean, these games are becoming they're costing as much as a tentpole summer blockbuster. It is. So I think what happens a lot of times is I think these studios that are creating and the companies that are publishing and things like that, I think they're terrified of it failing, like they need to make their money back. So I think too often they rely on something that has worked in the past. This game with this burly, grizzly white guy as the protagonist, last year was the best-selling game of the year. Well, let's do that. People obviously like that. Let's put that in our game. Then hopefully it will sell. I think that happens a lot. It happens a lot in Hollywood too. I think that's why most movies are getting more remakes or sequels or stuff like that, because I think they're terrified to try something a little bit different because of the amount of money that they're spending on these. And I tend to think that that's maybe where some of that's from. A little bit is the lack of female protagonists. Is it's coming from they're scared to believe that people will buy a video game with a female character on the box. Which is even interesting. BioShock Infinite. Who here has played that one?
It's a good game.
Great game. Originally, the box art was supposed to have Elizabeth on it.
I have. Yeah.
Who honestly is really kind of, I mean, she's the protagonist of that story, even though that's not the character you play. I mean, she's the most important part of that story. But originally, she was supposed to be on the cover, and their marketing department, this wasn't necessarily the creators of the game, it was the marketing department, that decided they didn't feel like that people would buy a first-person shooter kind of game like that with a woman on the box. So they put just Booker, the character you play, is the only guy in the box. You don't even see Elizabeth on there. And again, I don't necessarily think that that's a sexist decision. I think it's a foolish decision. Because I think there's a very untapped market out there. Like we were saying, I mean, if you count all type of gaming, about 50% of it is women now. But even if you don't exactly go by that number, there is, even within the hardcore scene, there's a lot more women, and I think there's potential there. I think even men, would like to play games like that. Like I said, I just bought the new Tomb Raider game, a couple of weeks ago. I'm loving it. I bought the original Tomb Raider years ago when that came out. I had Tomb Raider 1 and 2. I'm really loving the new game. Like like me personally, I don't mind playing a female character. It doesn't ruin my immersion into the game if the character doesn't look like me.
Kind of like Shell from Portal,
Mm-hmm.
Another female protagonist, and I mean that's, I don't know, probably one of my favorite games of all time.
Yes, that is a good one.
What about? And this is how much.
I remember reading about.
Kind of breaking up there, Isaac. Yeah, that's better.
Tomb Raider that Square Enix said that the game had failed to make as much money as it needed to make. But I also remember reading that they thought the game would make like $2 billion. So
Isaac is like,
I don't know.
you were lagging right now. You were making the longest point ever because it keeps like stretching out because you're kind of lagging there.
He's got terrible
I have no
connection
clue
right
how much money it was going to make, but it was funny.
I guess until Isaac kind of unfreezes a little bit. I think what he's talking about is, yeah, they did say that the Tomb Raider game did not make as much money as they wanted it to. Now, again, I think you can look more at that. Honestly, in relation to a lot of other games, it sold a lot of units. But the problem was they spent, like $300 million in making it. You get to that point where it's like, oh my God, I have to make so much money. It's even, again, looking at the Hollywood analogy, like Man of Steel. I mean, that was a success for Warner Brothers, but it wasn't that big of a success. I mean, it still made a lot of money, but it cost so much money to make that it's no longer quite these, blockbusters for them.
So, I mean, that kind of raises a question: is it that difficult to make a game that's got a female lead in it, that's compelling enough to sell? What, say, a Mass Effect sold?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, it kind of depends. I mean, you have the Metroid games have typically usually been pretty big sellers.
Mm-hmm. Well, they haven't made a Metroid game in a couple of years now.
Yeah, since Other M,
which didn't do well.
This is terrible.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you've got a couple of older ones that were kind of Nintendo properties. You had Perfect Dark. Is that one from back in the day? But I mean, I don't know. Those aren't games I've ever played myself. I've seen them played, but those don't strike me as very in depth. I mean, Metroid, you can take that girl out and put a guy in there, and you haven't changed the game one lick. Right, so is you have a shell that just has lady bumps. So is that really a woman, or is that a marketing gimmick? What is that?
That's a valid point. When you look at other big games, with female characters, but a lot of times they're games that you can choose any character. I mean, you have a lot of your RPGs where you can be whatever you want. Mass Effect, you can be femme shep or male shep. It's not really different.
But see, even with that Mass Effect thing, you could, and they had the female Shepard story was identical to the male Shepard story, and as far as their marketing stuff was concerned, the male Shepard was the face of Mass Effect, right? So again, you're favoring the male character in that game.
Yeah, I think, the big ads for that game were male shep. There was the big first trailer for Mass Effect 3. The one that was on TV was male Shepard. You had to go online to find the female Shepard version. And actually, the box art, if you flip it around on your Mass Effect 3 game, the backside is femme shep. So you could flip it and have femme shep be on your cover. But like you said, it starts out as male shep.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, well, what about the developer side of the picture? I mean, we've talked about the females in the games, but I mean, what about writing and because clearly that's a male-dominated industry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's changing. From what I've read, numbers are up over the last decade of women in the industry, but it's still, they're still the minority in it. Sorry, Paul's trying to get in here, and I'm trying to walk him through it.
I figured it out slowly.
Yeah, I think Robert and I actually we had a really long discussion about this Tuesday night. I think one thing that's interesting when you talk about, we're talking about female protagonists. There's not as many female protagonists. I wonder if sometimes that comes from there's not as many lead female developers of games. Whereas if you have more, female leads, they might be more apt to write a story about women.
Bayonetta was made by a female developer. Mm-hmm. That's like one of the premier examples of lead females in games today.
Yeah. See, now I haven't played those, but I've heard they're really good.
Mm-hmm.
There's been really famous female developers in the past. Roberta Williams is a biggie. She helped make King's Quest. Well, I guess didn't help. She created the King's Quest games. I don't know if you guys remember those.
Mhm.
And quick adventure games. Loved them. I loved those games. She was one of the founders of Sierra Online, which was one of the big companies for a really, really long time. But really, all the King's Quest were mainly male protagonists, except for the seventh one, which was much more Disney-esque, where it's kind of princesses, is the field they were going for. But all the other ones were male leads. And you have Jane Jensen, who created the Gabriel Knight video game series, which the second game in that series is one of my favorite games of all time. Again, mostly the protagonist is a man. So I mean, I guess it's not necessarily saying that if you get more women that they're going to be more apt to write characters as women. But as we have talked about, like the new Tomb Raider, that was written by a woman. Was the main writer on that game. But I do think, you know, from a writing standpoint, I think a lot of times people write what you know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think, you know,
Which is
Yeah.
probably why we have so many males in games.
and I think that's definitely part of it. You know, I don't necessarily, from my perspective, this is just my thoughts, is I think there is sexism in the industry, but I don't necessarily think of it as, I don't think there's a cabal of male developers trying to keep women out of games. I think it's something that has kind of naturally happened over time, and it almost makes it harder to get in because there are so few women involved in it that it's almost harder to get into now. But I don't think it was necessarily a concerted effort for that.
Well, there's still obviously some resistance. I mean, there is a lot of vitriol out there about, you know, this whole Gamergate thing and the sexist aspect of it. I mean, there's a ton of it. I mean, this Natalie gal's getting death threats, for Christ's sake. I mean, that's a big deal. Somebody clearly does not want her involved.
No.
You know, so I think there's got to be a rather large portion of misogynistic gamers out there, and at least some developers out there they're anti-female.
I wouldn't say it's a large group. I'd say it's a small vocal minority, but really, really loud vocal minority.
Well, as in probably with anything, you can't discount. Yeah, I'm sure. You know, as I said, you know, I don't think there's this cabal keeping it, but I'm sure there's plenty of asshole men that are, actively trying to keep women out because they're horrible people. But I think one of the interesting things I've kind of read about is I think a lot of companies would hire more women, but I don't think there's necessarily as many women applying for the same jobs in some of these video game companies. And I think some of that goes back more towards degrees and stuff that, you know, women tend to go after. It's like for a long time there, you know, women in like engineering fields was a very, very, very small amount, but you know that's increasing over time. But if there's maybe fewer people trying to get in, you know, going to school for that, trying to get in the industry, then you have fewer to apply for the jobs, you know. So maybe some of this maybe needs to start at a younger age, where we encourage women to kind of, you know, go after some of these types of careers. And if that would help, I mean, maybe if we get more women that are applying for the jobs, more women that are learning this, that, you know, hopefully we would see a larger representation of women in the industry itself. And that maybe be the true test, is, you know, if we start getting a lot more women that are applying for these jobs and they're absolutely not getting them, then I think you definitely have the case of, you know, there's a lot of misogyny in there.
I personally think more women in gaming can only make games better. I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, apparently, the number of female devs in the gaming industry has doubled in the past 5 years.
That's fantastic.
yeah, but what was that number 5 years ago? I mean, if it was, I mean, that sounds good, right? But if the number was 4 and we're up to 8 in 5 years, that's not impressive.
That's true.
2009 was like, I can link the article, but in 2009, based on the IGDA was 11.5, so now it's 22%, which is, still small, but
Not even quite a quarter, but
yeah.
But rising.
better.
Hmm.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, again, I think this is kind of this is an issue that's, there's maybe, to fix some of this stuff, it's maybe going to take years.
Yeah. It's not
You know?
an issue that's going to be resolved overnight.
No. I do think that one of the positives, though, with kind of the industry right now is there is more possibilities for people to enter the industry, kind of with the way the indie dev scene is. There's a lot more indie developers out there that can make these games, small games, 1 or 2 people teams, and get them out there and using, Steam or different things like that, people will see them. So
Mhm.
I think as far as indie developers, I'm kind of curious what the numbers would be as far as how many are women.
Yeah.
I bet it'd be higher than, the AAA industry.
22% of women are game developers. That's a lousy number. I mean, that's shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
I think we could do better, and I do think that there is, right or wrong, if this is completely indicative of gamers as a whole. But I think when you have these stories of some of these women developers getting death threats, I mean, I'd be shocked if that didn't discourage some women from wanting to get into the industry.
Yeah.
Then again, it's not necessarily saying that means that that's the largest percentage of gamers. They hate women and want to, murder them and send death threats. But I mean, it's got to be a little freaky. If I was a woman that was interested in it, I'd maybe at least think twice about it.
I'm kind of surprised the direction Gamergate went. It was originally supposed to be a anti-corruption within games journalism thing, but it's spiraled into a sexism thing, which has been largely ignored up until this point. And I think that's just indicative of people seeing that it's a problem, whether they're on the right or wrong side. It's up to opinion.
Yeah, well, I mean, I definitely have kind of my own views on Gamergate, and Robert and I had talked possibly about doing the whole stream on that sometime. But yeah, I mean, it's out there. I mean, that's kind of the narrative right now. I tend to think that it is a smaller, it's a smaller group, but even not necessarily always down gender lines. I mean, there's been cases before. Think of the uproar over the ending of Mass Effect 3. I mean, I saw
because that ending sucked.
Well, regardless, but I mean, I remember seeing people sending death threats to BioWare developers because they didn't like the ending of Mass Effect 3.
They deserved those death threats. women trying to get into gaming and women critical of sexism in gaming do not deserve death threats. But that shit that they pulled at the end of Mass Effect 3 was deserving of death threats.
Yeah.
They told us for 3 games, and I don't remember how many years, that your decisions mattered, only to find out that they didn't mean jack shit. Fuck their ending.
You heard it here, folks.
Look, it was the greatest ending ever written by anyone.
That was my soapbox moment. Go me.
Here, if you want my thing that I'll probably get death threats for, I enjoyed the Mass Effect 3 ending.
You deserve to die!
Wait, did you play with the DLC ending or the original? Ooh.
I did prefer the DLC ending, but
Yeah. See?
I did play both. So, but again, I think gamers even before this, there's a history of shit like this happening. Not always down gender lines. It's interesting. I think what happens a lot of times, and it could be wrong, I'm stereotyping a little bit, but I do think that people that maybe identify a little bit more in the hardcore scene typically seem to be a little bit more introverted, a little less outgoing. They kind of surround themselves in these things they really enjoy, and if somebody threatens that, they can feel very, very threatened by it. And I think that's Anita Sarkeesian. You know, honestly, I think the thing about Anita Sarkeesian that's the funniest for all the people that hate her. It's their own fault that she has the voice she has now. Because originally she was, because she's been doing stuff for quite a while, and she did a Kickstarter to do this Women in Video Games series. She was originally asking for about $6,000 to do it, and she got death threats. People hated her. Just all this stuff that came out, and people saw that and started giving her money to the point where I think she made $150,000, $160,000 on her Kickstarter.
Wow.
You know, and now she's a voice of this stuff more than anything, and it's like it's your own fault. These people that hate her. It's like if you wouldn't have attacked her and all this stuff, she probably would have barely made her $6,000, and probably everybody would have forgot about it. But
Well, and again,
made such a big deal about it.
Did you lose Isaac?
We just
Yeah.
I think so.
Again, when you do that, you make her right. She didn't have to give an argument,
Mhm.
right? When you're that afraid of what she's going to find out or what she's going to have to say, you're done. You lost before the battle ever started. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And not to mention, I mean, criticism is a good thing. Doesn't matter what type of criticism it is.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, she makes some valid points. I don't necessarily like the way she portrays her evidence. You know, she tends to minimize things that are important to maximize the message that she's trying to get across, and I think that's a little disingenuous at times. But I mean, besides all that, I mean, if you watch those two videos of that post that I shared, it's pretty clear there's some ridiculousness going on there. That somebody should take a critical eye and be like, do we really need prostitutes in every single goddamn sandbox game? Is that really necessary? You know? And I mean, but yeah, when you start threatening somebody like that, it doesn't matter what they say. They're right because you're afraid. And what else would you happen to be afraid of than the fact that, you know, you got no feet to stand on?
I don't know what you said, but I wholeheartedly disagree with you.
That's good because I was saying what a cool guy you were. So good job, smart guy.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, kind of back to the Anita thing. I think one of my big problems with her is I really much dislike. I think one of her major points that she's kind of making overall is, she tends more towards kind of the idea of like sexism in video games, sexist tropes and things in video games tend to make people that play them more sexist. And I have a really big problem with that line of reasoning. I don't know if you guys remember much of Jack Thompson. He was a guy kind of late 90s, early 2000s, crazy Florida lawyer guy. He was trying to link up school violence, school shootings and stuff, blaming on video games. He tried to represent several families to have class action lawsuits against video games.
Are the devil.
Yeah, basically his point was he was saying that violent video games make you violent. And he got laughed out of the room. I mean, a lot of these people that support Anita's big, kind of this big thing that yes, it makes you more sexist. I mean, they were the same people that, honestly, Jack Thompson got death threats, back when that was going on. But a lot of these people were against him, saying there's no evidence to back this up. There's no study that prove that this causes. But I do think, see, again, that's where my problem with Anita Sarkeesian is. If you are saying that this can cause sexist behavior to people playing him, I think you got to keep going with that. Then why wouldn't it cause violence? If it's enough of a motivator where it can motivate you to do something that you wouldn't do on your own, I think violence is on the table. And I agree with that.
I think you got to go backwards there, though, because they've done plenty of research that indicates that video games can't make you violent. The closest they've ever come is to say that if you have a penchant for violence anyway, video games can kind of help inspire you into that direction. But if you are not by nature a violent person, a video game cannot make you go out and commit an act of violence. So, a game is a game, and mind control is mind control. So if a game can't make a non-violent person violent, a game can't make a non-sexist individual sexist.
Right.
So, but you know, at the same time, you have to admit, I think, that if you are a misogynistic person or a sexist individual, a sexist game is only going to reinforce what bad beliefs you've already got.
Yeah.
See,
Right?
I don't completely agree with that. You know, I don't necessarily think that it can completely reinforce. I do think, though, that probably people that maybe have more violent tendencies are probably going to go towards violent media. Same thing, sexist individuals are probably going to, you know, gravitate towards sexist materials.
Well, that's more or less what I'm trying to say. Is yeah,
Right. I
the
don't
two are going
necessarily
to find their way together.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that can affect your behavior, you know, much. I mean, there are studies that kind of show that, you know, kind of aggression and stuff after playing video games can, you know, playing a violent video game may make you a little bit more aggressive, but it's a pretty short-term effect, and it's not really any different than about any other media.
And haven't there been studies on the same kind of topic where they found that it is kind of an aggression release? You know, people, you know, your adolescent people and their, you know, your high schoolers and that might be going out and being high schoolers and, you know, damaging public property or something like that, or less likely to do that if they're gamers because they're kind of getting that out of their system.
Well, yeah, I think video games in a big way is just an exercise in fantasy. So yeah, I mean, it allows us to do things in a world where nobody can get hurt that we can't experience in our everyday lives. I mean, that's what all games are. That's what all media is in a sense. You know, to greater or lesser extent, is escapism.
Yeah. But I don't know if there's many studies that completely show that either. I mean, I think there are some thoughts about that of being a release. It's kind of interesting, you know, it's again how you can make statistics kind of work in your favor.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people have said that, I mean, honestly, if you look at violent crime statistics, violent crime is down over the last 20 years. You know, it's going down. But, you know, by the same token, as some people are trying to say, well, you know, look at the rise of video games. It's obviously a release, and that's helping there be less violence. You know, violent crime, but I don't think you can take it that far either. You know, the correlation does not equal causation. But it is interesting. It's stuff for people that are much smarter than I am to investigate. But, and we lost Isaac again.
What's he doing? He just added an app for drawing and then bugged out, that kid.
I think he's having internet problems right now. Hi, he's back.
Damn high school kid. Oh, hey, dude, what's up?
Oh, hi.
You were having issues right now.
I don't know. It always does that around 10. For no reason.
Appears to be having less issues than Paul, though. But
Yeah, our friend Paul, it was supposed to be in the stream. And we've been trying to, if you see us kind of looking away sometimes, we're trying to fall through it, and he's not having a lot of luck right now. He's using Firefox, though, and we're using Google Hangouts.
He's using Firefox?
Just use Chrome. It's Google. Google's the devil, but their stuff works.
That's the problem with libertarians, is they do weird shit.
Let's now devote 15 minutes talking shit about Paul.
Is he watching this on YouTube? Is he gonna know that I said this?
Yes. Well, I don't know. He better watch it. People better watch this.
Well, piss on him. It's what he gets for using Firefox and keeping his candy in his briefcase.
That is one of the weirdest questions I've ever been asked. I want candy out of a random briefcase.
Yeah. Well, is there anything you guys else would like to talk about, kind of in regards to our overall themes tonight? Any more thoughts?
I think games are pretty fun.
Video games are fun. I agree.
Wow.
I think I've come to the conclusion that, yeah, there's sexism in games. I think it's getting better, and I think a certain degree of sexism is okay, because again, it's just, you know, games are part fantasy. So I mean, some of that stuff's just going to exist. You know, if you take that stuff away, it becomes something else. But I think with more women in the industry and some more critical thought about some of the stuff that we put into games, you have a much better, much smarter video game experience with sexism or sex in general. Even Anita admitted that there's room for for sex in gaming and the idea of sex in gaming.
Mm.
Yeah, I think you have to have that. I mean, that's honestly something that feminists fought long and hard for a really long time, for a woman to be sexual, and be okay. That's not, oh, she's a whore, she's a slut, So yeah, I think it's wrong to. I think some people are trying to go too far the other direction, where they're like, no, you can never have sexy women in video games, and I think that's not correct either.
I don't know. I think a good example of that is the fighting game Skullgirls, which is kind of an oddball in the fighting game because instead of having like 2 female characters, there's only 2 male characters in that game.
Yeah, that doesn't happen very often. But I think
How many, just out of curiosity, how many of those female fighters in that game, and I've heard of it, but I've not seen it, I want to know how many of them females are wearing pants.
Like 25%, 50.
you'd be wearing a very sensible pantsuit to fight.
Yeah. I mean, how many of them are wearing, we're talking fighter game, right? So how many of them are wearing, say, a gi, and not a G string? You know what I mean? Are they clothed? I mean, you got a team full of half-naked women doesn't mean that you overcome the sexist trope. You know what I'm saying?
How long have you been holding on to that, Robert?
It's scared to me. That's a fighting game with women. Yeah, but I've seen some of them women.
Well, I tend to think that the industry, beyond more representation again, I think is a good thing. I think pretty much most people honestly agree with that. I think what we need more of is, I think we need a little bit more risk-taking in a lot of our gaming industry, where we're gonna try these things a little bit more. Let's have more female-led video games. And again, it's interesting is that a lot of this parallels kind of what's going on with the movie industry. Is, I mean, the amount of female protagonists in Hollywood is real small. And we're talking about comic book movies are huge right now. We really haven't had a female-led comic book movie yet.
Well, we're getting Supergirl, right? Is that a TV show?
It's a TV
We did have a Supergirl movie.
It sucked.
Terrible.
Well, there's a new
Supergirl-
one coming out, right?
The Supergirl movie was just as good as the Mass Effect 3 ending.
No. Honestly, you want to talk about sexism, talk about the Supergirl movie.
That was terrible. That was a shitty
No,
movie.
it's a TV show.
Yeah, there is going to be a TV show, but again, I mean, I think there's the thing is, I think there's still, and again, I don't necessarily think of it as an intentional sexist kind of thing, but I think they're just too afraid to try something different, and I think, honestly, and what we need to do is we need to prove them wrong. I mean, if we want to see these things, we've got to vote with our wallet.
So then us fans of this stuff have got to be more vocal then, somewhere for them, in a positive way.
We got to pay the money. If a game comes out, strong female protagonist that looks like a good game, we need to buy it. Support the things we want to see more of, because that's how you get an industry to change. Especially a billion-dollar industry is got to show them that there's money to be made. Because I don't think, as a corporation, I don't think these corporations are necessarily sexist. I think they just look at dollar signs, cold hard, just cold hard numbers. If you can show them the numbers that show that yes, gamers want more female characters, more diversity in them, if you could show that it's profitable for them, I think they'll do it. But
How much? I wonder how much the game Transistor sold. That was a game with a female protagonist. It was also really good.
Yeah, that's kind of a hard one. That's much more of an indie, smaller title.
Yeah.
Because I think, honestly, though, when you do kind of look at the indie scene, you do have a lot more female protagonists.
Mm-hmm.
I guess probably more what we've been talking about tonight is more kind of the AAA, the large budget kind of things. Because I think the indie scene has its own thing a little bit. There's definitely a lot of female protagonists in those games. But as far as the AAA, like I said, come to mind over the last few years, really big releases with female protagonists. Can't think of that many. We had Tomb Raider. Bayonetta 2 just came out.
You kind of see them learning, like the first Portal game was a bonus that came if you bought the Half-Life 2, They just threw that out there for free, basically, with a female protagonist, and people loved it, and they came back with, Portal 2, bigger, better, and I mean, maybe that's just kind of proving what we're talking about here, you put it out there, and people are going to buy it and vote with their wallets, so.
Well, honestly, even, Portal, a female antagonist, too.
Yeah, well, yeah, actually, technically.
Yeah.
A computer, but...
Spoilers. Robert.
Spoilers.
We gotta be careful. Spoilers.
Robert will give us death threats.
A spoiler here or there is okay. In fact, 3 or 4 of them are okay. But when you're like, this is how it ends, this is the big payoff right here, and I really like it. Let me go into detail. Then you've crossed the line. You got to put a big box.
Did she at least finish the review with, I just saved you $11?
She should. She should.
That would be kind of funny blog. Yeah.
She's not going to come on these anymore, Robert.
Just tell her I'm a jerk and nobody likes me. I mean, it was a good review. I wished I'd have read it, though, after I watched the movie.
It's true.
She doesn't need to change a thing she did, except for next time, instead of just putting spoilers at the top, she needs to put spoilers hugely written, bold-faced, italicized, underlined, box that sucker, and put some lights on it, and then make the whole thing the background color, font color, so that you got to highlight it in order to see the words, just in case. You ever seen them do that before?
Yeah. Yep.
That's how you do that, and then you can tell them anything you wanna. I'm still gonna go watch that. In her defense, I'm still gonna go watch that movie because she made it sound really good.
Yeah, it looked really awesome. I got a chance to go yet.
And I know how it ends in case you guys want me to tell you.
Back to our topic here. We'll kind of start wrapping up here. We've been going for about an hour now, so we'll kind of start coming to the end of our discussion, which I think was an interesting discussion, a little bit of a few different viewpoints, which I think is a good thing. Again, I think to end with, again, I think what we need to is we need that more representation. I think a lot of that comes from we need to encourage. I think we need to encourage more women to get involved in the industry and to do things. I think across all media, I think would be a positive, not just the video game industry. I mean, for me personally, and this isn't trying to sit up on some kind of high horse or anything like that, but I noticed there for a while a lot of my own writing and when I'd work on shorts and different things were typically always male protagonists. A lot of times it was me because I love myself. But even that, as I kind of started looking at that, I'm trying to change that up. Our horror movie short that we did a couple of months ago, there's 2 characters in the whole thing, and they're both women. And I was just trying to, because I think we need more of that. And if we have the opportunity to encourage that, I think we should. Otherwise, we can just sit and bitch forever. But if we're never going to do anything, then you're just sitting and bitching.
That should be our first T-shirt we make. That quote right there on it.
The Sprocket Docket, just sitting and bitching. All right. Well, I'd say let's kind of come to the point. Any final thoughts from anybody? And we'll kind of close her out here.
Yeah, I got one. Can I share with you guys something I found?
Okay.
Because Halloween's coming up, and this is just funny as shit. I wanted to share it with you guys. So I was going through some stuff, and I found this website that was... Derek, you ought to love this, because you like crappy movies.
Yes, I do.
So it was a list of 80s horror flicks you probably never heard of. And there's a whole bunch of them on here, and I was going through them, and I found one, and it's called Hard Rock Zombies from 1985.
Do not know that one.
Not surprising. It's not a blockbuster film. But I got to read you this description, and I got to tell you why I thought this was so funny. Well, it should be self-evident why it's funny, but this is the description. A hard rock band travels to... Remember that hard rock theme from Miami Connection? Anyway, a hard rock band travels to a tiny and remote town of Grand Guignol to perform. Peopled by hicks, rubes, werewolves, murderous dwarves, sexual perverts, and Hitler. The town is a strange place, but that doesn't stop the band's lead singer from falling in love with a local girl named Cassie. Now now picture this for a minute. You got a couple of guys writing this shit, right? And one day they get a call from the money man, the producer sits them down, and he's like, "Hey, listen, guys, we like what you're doing. We're excited, but we got to talk, right? Now your movie's got just about everything, man. You got werewolves, and you've got rubes, and you got sex perverts. It's a great start, but we're a little concerned because most of these guys can be just misunderstood. You know, sex pervert, he could just be lonely. Werewolves, everybody knows. Werewolves just looking for a good home. But what you guys need is a definitive villain. Somebody the entire audience can just hate. So we've decided we think you need Hitler in your movie. He's been off the radar for a while. We need to put Hitler in your film, and this is going to put us all on the map. You trust me, boys, and we'll make money. And that shit's funny. That's a real fucking movie.
I need to watch this now.
Yeah.
You have piqued my interest.
Yeah, so anyway, I wanted to share that with you. Fucking Elvis, or Hitler. That's funny shit.
You confused Elvis and Hitler?
Yeah, I did. Well, there's another one in there I think has got Elvis in it, actually. There's one here all about rednecks.
Wow.
There's elves in that one. Maybe that's where I got Elvis. Yeah, it's got elves in that one. So pissed off elves and rednecks. Anyway, it's the 80s.
It's the 80s. All right. Anybody else have any parting thoughts here?
I think Robert kind of took it, so can't really top that.
Games are fun.
Games are fun.
Yeah.
That's probably a good way to end it.
Yeah.
Go buy Transistor.
All right. Well, I think, that's probably going to do it for us tonight. We're hopefully going to kind of turn this into a weekly thing. So if you would, though, please like our Facebook page, share this video. Please go watch it. Send it to people you know. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you hated it, I guess, let us know. Let us know if you liked it or didn't like it. Give us some feedback. This is kind of new for us, so we're at least having fun. I am. Yeah, share, like our shit. We're cool. So,
Derek's is pretty cool. Yeah.
Thank you. I am.
Robert.
I think it's legging out again.
Legging out is insulting Robert.
Almost said something really clever.
It was so clever, Google can handle it. All right.
With that, we're going to call it a day. So, thank you all.
See ya.